Phoenix Rising community, your boy Ken Ward is back with another interview of a spectacular, what we call superhero here at Phoenix Rising. If you're new to the channel, we are here for three reasons: educate, inform, and inspire. Our mission is to build a Black business class in these United States of America. We believe in capitalism, and we believe that the people who are providing opportunities for themselves and other folks are people who should be interviewed, talked to, and learned from. And do I have someone for you all today? I mean, so a lot of times I interview people and I don't personally know them, but this man I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to get to know his story. When we're going to talk origin story, he has one. And if you're old enough to remember this term, he's my homeboy from the city of brotherly love. We're going to talk this. We're going to talk to Stan Greene today. It's going to be a fantastic show, and I say this every show, but if you're not inspired after hearing from Stan Greene, there ain't no inspiration in you. I'm just sorry. There's not, because this what he has to offer us today is going to be amazing. But before we get there, you all know how this works. If you're on YouTube, hit the share button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, hit the share button. If you're on Instagram, IG, send this to somebody in the inbox. They need this inspiration in their inbox. So now that we got all the social media out, we're not on TikTok because I'm not doing any dancing. So we got all the social media out the way. So let's go and let me introduce you to a very spectacular gentleman, someone that I humbly respect, and I'm so glad that he is going to give us some of his time today. So let me introduce you all to Stan Greene. Stan, how are you?
Oh, fantastic, Ken. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Stan. Stan is the CEO of Power Thinking. Stan, well, we're going to start off like we always start off. I tell everybody this story. If you've watched one show, you've heard the same thing. My older brother collected comic books, which means I collected comic books. And in every Marvel comic, DC too, there's an origin story, whether it's Batman, Superman, Wolverine, Cyclops, X-Men, they all have origin stories. And we're going to delve right into your origin story because your background is so voluminous, I'm going to say. And so I'm going to ask you directly, Stan, tell us your origin story, man.
Sure. Well, my origin was I was born and raised in Philadelphia. And if you go back to origins before that, I'm actually doing a lot of work on ancestry to really get a sense for, my ancestors and their origins. And what's really crazy is that, when I was living in West Philadelphia around 32nd and Haverford as a young child, I had a great grandmother who I used to see and spend time with and observe and just watch how she was always working and real humble. And just recently found that she was born in 1888, and that her dad was born in 1837, and they lived in Athens, Georgia, which is the home of the University of Georgia. But learning a lot there, and it's helping me to really come to grips with my origins as it goes back to my ancestry. But living in Philadelphia, I was in West Philadelphia, and then lived in North Philadelphia, around what's called 30th and Diamond in North Philadelphia, and then West Oak Lane. And I wound up going to public schools in Philly. Germantown High was my high school. And I was fortunate enough to play basketball. And it kind of gets back to what I do now with power thinking and helping people to recognize the power that we all have to bounce back from any adversity. What got me on a really interesting path was when I was in 8th grade in what was called junior high school. They're called middle schools now. When I would, in order to kill time, before the school starts, a number of us would be in the gym and we would watch, the good basketball players play. One day they were shorthanded and they looked at me and said, "Hey, come on in and play." And I tried to tell them that I couldn't play. I didn't know how to play basketball. I'd never played before. They didn't believe me. I came in and I proceeded to really mess up. I didn't even dribble the ball. I'd walk with it and so forth. But they teased me the next day on the way back to school and say, "Hey, Greene, you're going to mess up again." And at that point, I think that got me started on this path. Number one, of recognizing the power that we have to bounce back from anything, because I was determined I was going to learn that game and I was going to beat those guys that would tease me. And I went on to, by the time I was a junior in high school, just a few years later, I was a starter for a basketball team they called the Jolly Green Giants. Our colors were green and white, and we had a 7-footer, a 6'9", 6'6", and I was 6'3" and was able to play guard. And we were really a force in Philadelphia from a team standpoint. And then it led me to go on to University of Pennsylvania. But my beginnings were humble and, just like anybody else. But again, what sparked me, on this lifelong path to really, understand, the power that we all have to be able to accomplish anything that we put our minds to, kind of started in earnest from my childhood, particularly in 8th grade.
All right, so let's go back, and I try to, because people just gloss over kind of their origin stories because it's what they live. But that Jolly Green Giant, y'all won a city championship that year, didn't you? It wasn't just.
Well, actually, that year, first of all, going back when I was on the JV in 10th grade, because I remember you went to. I remember that you went to Bartram High, right? And I'll never forget Bartram because it was my first year in high school as a 10th grader. Played on the JV and was one of 6 JV players to go to practice with the varsity when they were making a playoff run for the city championship. And we were working out with them, and we had the best seats in the house because we could sit on the bench with the varsity guys. And we watched them in the public league championship against Bartram, your alma mater. And that team was led by none other than Kobe Bryant's dad, Joe Bryant. And unfortunately, they beat us by junior year, the year we're talking about with the huge team. Unfortunately, we were knocked out not by another team, but by a teacher strike. And so our second game in the season, there was a teacher strike, and that just destroyed the whole season. We were certainly expected to win it all. My senior year, we were expected to win it all and got upset by a team called Simon Gratz by 1 point in the semifinals. But that's one of those things that happens in life. You just never know. That many times you're expected to do great things, and things happen. There's a setback, and the question becomes, how do you respond to that? Do you sulk and really get down on yourself? Fortunately, I had things to look forward to. I couldn't dwell on that because I was recruited by a couple of schools, and one was the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, along with Yale, which was another Ivy League school. And the coach that recruited me was a guy named Chuck Daly, who went on to win 2 NBA championships with the Bad Boys, Detroit Pistons, and coached the Dream Team, the first Dream Team with Larry Bird and Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and all those guys. So it was really a privilege to be recruited by somebody like that who went on to do great things and to play at a school that back in those days in the 70s, I can recall a few years before I came on board, the team was University of Pennsylvania was number 3 in the country, with UCLA being number 1, Marquette being number 2. And of course, we got to be ranked by the end of my senior year, number 20 in the country. And the following year, the team went on to the Final Four with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. So I was really fortunate to have that experience. And again, it goes back to that 8th grade. If I wasn't determined to bounce back from being teased, I probably would have never been in that position to be recruited by schools like Penn.
And we're going to we definitely going to stay with that, because I'm I'm trying not to give away, because there's so much, because I like I said, I know a little about your history, so I'm trying not to give it away. I want you to tell them. But after Penn, it wasn't over. Like, you after you graduated from Penn, had a great basketball career and academic career at Penn. You went out in the world and started working. Was doing big things. Tell us about that.
Oh, sure. Well, I wasn't. I was more of a defensive player at Penn, so and we had these super strong offensive players. So my role was to guard people like Bernard King, who Chuck Daly would say, we're watching film on Tennessee. He played for Tennessee. He's one of the top 50 of all time in the NBA, and was a huge scorer at the New York Knicks. And I was, tasked with trying to shut him down, if anybody could do that. And I held him to 27 points. Held him to 27.
Hey, that's a success. When you talk about Bernard King, that's a success. He could put up 40 in his sleep.
That's right.
For those folks who don't know who Bernard King was, he could shoot from anywhere on the court at any time. Had one of the quickest releases that I think.
That's right.
In athletic, in sports history. I mean, basketball history. I mean, his releases.
Yeah. And the secret was, one big secret, don't let him get the ball. So I'm standing in front of with my hands up. You're not getting this ball, because once you do, it's all over. And Norm Nixon, who played with the Lakers, won a championship with Magic Johnson, those guys, he played for Duquesne, and I actually fouled him out of the game. We went into triple overtime. I fouled him out in the second overtime, drew 2 charges on him. And he actually came over as he was walking to the bench, stopped, came over, shook my hand. But one guy who's still one of the top best players in European history, when we played in a tournament in Europe, named Wayne Brabender, folks can look him up. He's there with Dirk Nowitzki and those folks as a top European player, and really shackled him. But even with all that, because I wasn't really in the offense, I wasn't recruited in the NBA. But I did get a letter from the Seattle Seahawks to try out for football. And I said, no way. I mean, I wasn't going to do that. My mother wouldn't let me play football in school. So I hadn't played. I wasn't going to, try out for an NFL team at 6'3" and 175 pounds. It just wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I went into the work world. I worked for the telephone company. I kind of interviewed with a number of different companies in business, even though I wasn't a business major. And here's the thing, folks, because you didn't major in business doesn't mean that you can't be a business person. And at the time I was interviewing with banks, and I bumped into a guy who used to play basketball for Brown, and he was working with the telephone company, what is now Verizon. And he said, hey, give me your resume. I gave him my resume. He took it in to the company. They interviewed me, and the bank at that time, and this was going way back, was offering $12,000 a year, and the telephone company offered me 18. So it was a no-brainer. It was all about money. Who's paying the most? That's where I'm going.
Right.
And I had some really interesting opportunities there, because after my first 9 months, which was called the trainee period, they said after 12 months, then they would determine whether you had what it took to be able to move into middle management in those companies. And they discovered after 9 months that I had what it took. Plus, there was an opportunity that came up. There was an operation in Northwest Philadelphia that managed the construction work for the telephone company in that region. And there was what would happen is the engineers would design cable replacements, old cables that caused staticky lines or no dial tone back in those days that were very old, and they were scheduled to be replaced. But this particular operation was so disorganized. I mean, jobs would be in various stages of completion, and they couldn't realize the benefit of getting the new cables in so that these problems could be eliminated. So you still had problems, and you had jobs that weren't completed. And so I came in, I'm 22 years old, and they said, we're giving you the worst control center, management center in the city. let's see what you can do with it. And in 9 months, with me and my team, we got that thing organized, squared away. And which was really interesting because the district manager was a Penn grad, Penn athlete. He was a track and field star, and he was impressed by what I was able to do. And you just never know. It's always best, no matter what you're doing, to give it your absolute best, because you never know who's watching and you never know how it's going to help you down the road. And so I went from that job. It was funny because the person who was a division level person, really high up, he kind of joked. He said, "Stan, if you straighten that place out, we'll make you a vice president." Ha ha ha. I straightened it out, and I was looking for my vice presidency. It didn't happen. What they gave me, I was 23 now, and they said, "Okay, we're going to give you the Oakley Street gang." And there was a street in Northeast Philadelphia called Oakley Street where they had a Bell garage, and the people in that garage pretty much dictated how they were going to work. They took their time, wasn't very productive, and it was a problem. And so they said, "Stan, you're going to get the Oakley Street gang in Northeast Philly." And at that time, this was 1980s, 40 years ago, they didn't have many African Americans up there in management or non-management. So I'm the only one in the whole garage. Right. I stepped in, and they're expecting me now to turn that whole operation around, when these guys have never worked with African American, let alone somebody that's only 23 years old, that doesn't know anything about construction, or a telephone company, splicing techniques and so forth. So I took over this splicing crew. They were the folks who, they would go up on the poles, and they had the bucket trucks, and you'd see them with their hard hats on, and they're working on putting the wires together. Or you see the blower in the manhole, and you look down, and those folks, those are my guys. I'm 23, and I'm directing them and expecting not only to direct them, but to improve their productivity. And in over a year and a half, we did that. And so it was really interesting. Then I went in to be an engineer. Here's a person I didn't go to school for engineering. I didn't go to school for business, and yet I'm running, business for the telephone company. I'm supervising crews. I'm a engineer. When the company broke up, the whole Bell system broke up and created all these baby Bells, like Bell Atlantic and Bell South and so forth. I was a big part of all of that was going down. There were many, many different assignments that I was fortunate enough to take advantage of that served me well to this day. And most of them were underperforming situations where, folks said, "Well, we need some help here." And I'd come in and I'd focus on the people and their mindset, and focus on ways to turn them around from, "Hey, we can't do this," to, "Yeah, we can make this happen. We can do this." And it was just an amazing ride. But now that's 12 years just with the telephone company. But it was in the last 4 or 5 years with the telephone company that I did what I hope every single person could do. If you're a W-2 employee, you're working for a company, branch out, and in addition to getting your pay every 2 weeks, do something entrepreneurial. There are plenty of, especially in direct sales, because if you can get into that and master direct sales, it will not only position you for entrepreneurship, but it'll make you more confident as a person working for a company. Because now you're not totally at the mercy of your supervisor, whoever. You have the confidence to know that you can step out at any time. So I actually joined it was about 85 or so. I joined a company called A.L. Williams. And A.L. Williams is now what's called Primerica. And they were selling insurance and term insurance and so forth. But I wanted to use that to try to educate people about finance, particularly in the African American community. So I wound up putting on a 29 years old, putting on a credit seminar for the first time. Even though I was shy and didn't like to talk to people, I decided I was going to put on one of these seminars. I joined a group called Toastmasters so that I can feel more comfortable speaking. I used my credit cards to buy to buy a course on credit and absorb the information. And I put on a seminar. But in that process, this is the thing that really changed things for me. In the process of promoting the seminar, because I talked to my coworkers at the telephone company to come support me, one person told me they knew a person, and this is the importance, and that's why I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. You just got started. Once I got started and I locked into getting a room at the Marriott Hotel, used to be on City Line Avenue, I went big. I didn't go for, trying out, thinking, maybe a PTA meeting of like 10 people. I can try my material out, see how good. I booked a room for 100 people at the Dunphy City Line Marriott and hung up and I said, okay, I'm committed now.
Right.
I got to do it.
And for those people watching, just for those people watching across the country, because we're on the internet, so City Line Avenue, Marriott, and it's a big deal in the city of Philadelphia. It's a big deal. Like that ain't no small, but then pick whatever big Marriott you have in your town, and that's the one he booked.
That's right. Yeah. And so then I said, I got to make this happen. And I got to get people to come. So I talked to my coworkers at first, and they, a lot of them said, yeah. One person said, look, you're going to need to promote this. I know a person that does a little radio show on finance. I'll call him and connect you guys. He did, connected me to get on this show on a Sunday, and I'll never forget it. And I started making up flyers and going out to the different malls and putting the flyers on. I'm going to be on the radio on the station, and the station WDAS in Philadelphia, WDAS AM on a Sunday. And I'm on a corner up in Germantown handing out flyers to people. I get home that night, the night before the show, I get a call from the guy who's the host and said, Stan, sorry to tell you this, we've been canceled. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. Who did this? He said, well, the person that runs, all the volunteer broadcasters. And I said, who is she? And he told me her name. And I said, well, give me her number. He said, no, look, you don't know. It's a done deal. When she said we're not going to do it, we're not going to do it. And I said, look, man, I have nothing to lose. Can you give me her number and let me call her? And he said, okay. He gave me a number. I called her. And it was rough sledding. I called and she said, hello? I said, hi, is this Miss Humphrey? And she said, yeah. And I said, my name is Stanley Greene. Yes. I understand my show was canceled. Yes. I said, uh-oh, this is going to be rough. But it turned out that we both knew someone. When I mentioned I went to Penn, she mentioned a person, Craig Littlepage, who actually was a longtime AD at University of Virginia, and just retired. I played ball at Penn, went to Cheltenham High in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. We had something in common. When she learned about what I was trying to do for the community, she not only said that I was good for that show, but she wanted me to come on her show, which was on the FM station and Sunday mornings. And that led to me forming relationships with icons in Philadelphia, like Georgie Woods, who then gave me part of his time to do a show. And I did a 1-hour financial show. I did these 30-second financial tips on the FM. The whole point of all of that is everyone, you're thinking about doing something and you've been thinking about it, just go ahead and do it. These seminars also led to me writing a regular weekly column in the African American newspaper called the Philadelphia Tribune in Philadelphia. Because after one of my seminars, remember, if I didn't make the decision to do it, this wouldn't have happened. At one of the seminars, a person came up to me and said, hey, I have my mother is actually the business manager for the Philadelphia Tribune. You ever think about doing a column? I said, no, not really. He said, you should think about it. If you're interested, let me know. Do you know that 4 months went by and I didn't call and inquire about it? And at one point I just said, because I would think about it, hey, you know what? I'm going to call it. And then I just decided again, I'm going to do it. And I picked up the phone. I called him. He connected me. That led to me doing it for about 4 years before I got involved in running cable systems and everything, of doing a column called Financial Success with Stanley H. Greene. It was during a time when A woman by the name of Emma Chappelle wanted to start the first African-American owned bank in Philly called United Bank of Philadelphia. I was able to have her on my program and wrote columns about it. And we got some momentum going with me and some other people. A person you probably heard of, E. Stephen Collins, was on the radio. And we did some incredible things. And that bank is still in existence in Philadelphia. But the point again is, if you want to get something done, you have to just do it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just get out and do it. And over time, it's going to develop and it's going to grow. And this was all during my time in the 12 years at the telephone company. But what that did was that gave me power to, and it was now about 30 years ago, when the telephone company said, we're going to offer all managers an opportunity to leave if they would like, and we'll give them a package. And I thought, whoa, here's an opportunity now for me to go out and do my own thing. I took the package. But at the same time, remember that district manager that benefited when I was a young guy and straightened out that management center? He had moved on. That was back, but 10 years prior. Now he's with a cable company as a vice president, working for an entrepreneur named Jerry Lenfest in the Philadelphia region, who had one of the largest cable TV operations in the country. But he had one cable system that was tremendously underperforming. It was horrible. And they wanted me to come in and turn it around. And he knew that I could do it. This had nothing to do with, diversity and inclusion. And they wanted to have an African-American because they were getting, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with this guy, Stanley. I don't care if he was purple. That guy knows what he's doing. I want him in here to help me out and to help us out. And that's what happened. And we turned around a cable system in Delaware County, PA, that was ranked number 11 out of 13. And we moved it to number 2 in a year and a half. And Jerry Lenfest, the major entrepreneur, became, he was convinced that I was the real deal. And a few years later, I ran a company as president that turned it around called The Box, a music video channel. Was involved in a lot of other things, but those are other stories entirely.
So let's go back just a tad bit, because unfortunately I get tasked for the Phoenix Rising community asking the hard questions, and we're always looking to inspire. So I know there's somebody out there saying, well, Stan, you're an Ivy League guy. Like, you were supposed to do all that because you went to the Ivy, you're a Penn grad. What do you say to that, Stan?
Well, I say that's baloney, quite frankly. There was a person who wanted to get into Penn, one of my clients, and had a niece who loved Penn and wanted to be an Ivy Leaguer, and actually applied this past year, but didn't get in. And I sent a note back and I said, look, you actually had more to bring to Penn than Penn, was going to do for you. And so, I would argue that it was, going back to my experiences growing up in Philadelphia, in the city, and coming up in public schools, overcoming adversity, that really equipped me to do the things that I was doing. It was what I brought to Penn, not what Penn did for me. And I tell this, I had a talk with all the football players of the football team, and I told them the same thing. Because just keep in mind that you brought more to that university to help that university than the university is going to be doing for you. And never forget that. So I argue, folks, that it doesn't really matter where you go, it's what you come with, particularly as it relates to this thing that I focus on now with my company, Power Thinking. You see part of the logo in back of me, that we have this power in terms of what we think and in what we do that will ultimately determine our success and how we bounce back from the things that go wrong. When people say, well, I didn't go to the right school, I didn't come from the right neighborhood. Well, I didn't come from the right neighborhood to be able to go to that school, but I did it. You have to turn that around and say, why not me? It doesn't matter, what my background was and what my income level was, and the fact that, my parents may have been poor, or that my ancestors, may have been slaves. The fact is that if I can think it and believe it, I can do it. So I would argue that, I was very close to going to Temple. I was thinking, Davidson wanted me. I would have gone to any of those schools, and ultimately, I would have been successful. Now, I remember this. I'll leave that point with this. Over the past few years, I just started listening to many of the basketball games that were aired on the radio at Penn. Of course, I was playing, so there was no way I could listen to them. But they were recorded, and there's a person that created a website that put all of these recordings and video on that site. So I could download on my phone. I listened to this one game where we played Dartmouth, and there was a guy who was doing some commentary. He was the brother of one of the NBA's all-time great players, Oscar Robertson. His name was Bailey Robertson, and he was working for Converse at the time, Converse sneakers. And they had him come in, and he was commenting on different players. And I'll never forget the one comment he mentioned about me. He said, "Yeah, I was talking to Chuck Daly, and he said, yeah, Stanley Greene is one of those character guys, and whatever he does, in the future, he's going to be a great success at it." I'm like, what was I, 21 years old when he said that? And I said, wow, I didn't know that. And I didn't know Chuck Daly thought that about me.
Right. You said that's not what Chuck Daly called you in practice, huh?
Right, no, exactly. No, he was a pretty cool guy. He wouldn't do that kind of thing. But the thing is that there was something about me, I guess, that other people saw that I didn't see, that I had, that it was instilled in me by my parents, my family, that continues. So again, to that point, going to an Ivy League school is nice, but it doesn't ensure that you're going to be successful. And there are many Ivy League folks that I know who have had incredible setbacks, but because they somehow felt deep down that shouldn't happen to a person that went to an Ivy League school, they weren't able to bounce back and had some serious challenges. So it really doesn't matter where you were educated, how much money your family may have had, what color you are. The fact of the matter is that we all are equipped with this incredible power to be able to dream big, think big, and get there. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have setbacks. We may have some crushing setbacks. I've had them. So you'll hear about all the great stuff. I talk about all that. Talking about all the stuff that wasn't so great and was downright traumatic is very difficult to do. But that's as much a part of my background as all the great stuff that's happened.
Okay. All right. Let's go to, you said that they offered a package. And I like the way you said they offered a package, and I saw an opportunity. Delve more into that, because a lot of people would have been like, well, you know what, if I just stay here for 10 more years, I can get my gold watch. And, what was it that made you see it as an opportunity and take the opportunity?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked that, Ken. That was a real challenging time. I was in my early 30s. I was 12 years with the telephone company. It moved up into some decent positions, and, by all accounts, would have had a nice career, because most people, when they came into utilities like that, they spend 30 years. I have a person now that's been there that I've known. I played basketball with in the Bell teams. He's still there, and it's now 42 years he's been there. It would have been about that if had I stayed. And you get a nice send off, you get a nice watch, and they have a nice retirement party for you, and now you're part of the Facebook group, Bell Telephone retirees, and all folks talk about is, so what happened on your medical plan? Well, how about are you still getting your free Verizon service, or this person just passed away? I didn't want a life like that. I wanted to, as long as I live, be able to make an impact. And so once I dabbled into entrepreneurship and had my own company, S.H. Greene Associates, and was providing value to people, I'd go on the radio with these radio tips and so forth. And I can tell you, I did a power thinking session just a few weeks back, and there was one lady at this nonprofit where I did the session on power thinking and these skills that I teach and so forth, who said, "Mr. Greene, I remember you when you were on the radio, and it's because of what you shared with me that I was able to send my three girls to college, to Cheney State University." I said, "Oh my gosh." And this was just recent. So I knew back then that I had more to offer than just doing what I did for the phone company. And it was because of that experience that I had, and I knew that I was making a difference because people would tell me, "Oh, I listen to you all the time." If I would go out somewhere and I mention who I am, and, "Oh yeah, you know, you're on the radio, and I love your financial advice." That gave me the confidence to say that, you know what, most people wouldn't do this because, you know, you're with a good company that pays well. You know, I had a bright future ahead. No one was going to leave. But I decided I was going to take that chance. And it was difficult because I had young children, was married, had a mortgage, and I had to convince my wife that, you know, I can do this. And when she was concerned, as you would expect, and but she said, "Okay, okay, go ahead and do it." And I got the package, and you know, I was talked into going a different direction and actually, you know, running these cable TV systems, and I went down that path. But I would not have had enough of the in of guts, just pure guts, to make that move had I not been able to dabble on the entrepreneurial side and get some confidence in my abilities to be more than just an employee for a big company. And you know, what's interesting about all of that is that I left that company and people were worried about me. They said, "Oh my gosh, Stan left. What is he going to do? The world's going to come to the end, to an end for this poor guy. He's left the big Ma Bell." And then of course they saw me with a cable company. I left at a manager level. I worked at one cable company for 2 years, and then another cable company. One was Suburban Cable, then Greater Media Cable in Philadelphia. Do you know that when I left in 1990, by 1993, just 3 years later, I got a call from a man who was the senior vice president of then what was called Bell Atlantic, now Verizon, who reported to the CEO, Ray Smith of Bell Atlantic, who was the architect for putting 9X and Bell Atlantic and then GTE together to form what is now Verizon. The gentleman who actually put a bug in the senior vice president's ear to bring me back to the company was a guy named Bruce Gordon, who was considered back then one of the top African American executives in the country. And he actually said, you guys need to go out and get Stan Greene. He's doing this great stuff in the cable industry. And he actually is the guy, Bruce Gordon, is credited with naming that new company, Verizon, the name that we all take for granted now, because the African American that created that name, or actually got an advertising agency to pull all that together. Well, I came back as a vice president. I left as a manager level, went away to the cable industry, came back. I was like 4 or 5 levels higher. People couldn't believe it. All those people that were worried about it, like, "What the heck?" He came back because they called me when I was at the second cable company, because the telephone company knew at that time in the mid-90s that they wanted to get into the cable business, and they are in it now. Fios. When I came back, I was on those projects that led to what is now Fios. And so they said, well, man, Stan knows the telephone company. He's in the cable industry and making waves. Let's bring him back. When I was in the cable industry, I'm talking going back 27 years ago, I was inducted into the National Association for Minorities in Cable Hall of Fame. And so they said, bring him back. I came back, I was like 4 or 5 levels higher. I reported to a guy who reported to the CEO of the entire company at age 37. So it was absolutely amazing. But here's the point. If I didn't make that move when they offered that package, none of that would have happened. I
Right.
actually would have been, maybe in 4 years, I would have bumped up one level. Because at that
Right.
time, they said there's a freeze. We're not bringing anybody. We're not promoting anybody. I went sideways, did all this stuff. Then they said, oh my gosh, we got to bring them back. They brought me back. And after a few years, I left again because there was an opportunity to be a president of a music video programming network that competed against MTV that was struggling, and I went on to do that. Well, the whole thing goes all the way back to making a move and
Mm-hmm.
taking a risk. And so I'm glad you brought that up. It was during that time when they offered that package. Had I not had that entrepreneurial experience on the side, I probably would not have known, the true ability I had to take risks, to do anything that I set my mind to.
All right, so let's go there. Let's go that way because I know you actually let me pause for the viewership, Phoenix Rising community. Again, we're here to inspire, educate, inspire, and inform. And I always change them up because I never know what's going to educate you, what's going to inspire you, and what's going to inform you. So we just give you as much information as we can about the great people. I told y'all Stan was a superhero. I didn't know he was a Hall of Famer too. So this is my first Hall of Fame interview. I thought it was going to be Dr. J, but I'm gonna take you, Stan Greene. I'm gonna take you. So hit the share button. I mean, if you have not appreciated what Stan has given, the information, it's baloney. This is not because I went to Ivy League school. This is because I believe in myself and my upbringing. And I didn't know that you started out in West Philadelphia. I always thought you was North Philly dude, but my North Philly roots. This is what we're here for. For all my people in Philly, Stan is one of ours. And this is anybody coming out of any major city, Detroit, Houston, any suburb or rural area in Georgia. This is all possible. And there's something, and we're about to get into really what Stan does in a few minutes, because what he does is help people realize that it is really possible, and how to train your brain to do the things that you really were put here to do. So Stan, the great thing, and I think we'll go to the story of how most people just start a business. Stan is like, you know what? I'm gonna buy that business. I'm gonna buy those. Well, I don't want to give it away, but you tell us how that came about. Tell us a little bit about power thinking, and we've been through your career and you building yourself up to what you're about to do as far as the storyline about the business that you decided that was in fact your calling.
Yes. So after all the cable and the programming, I actually was part of some major setbacks as well. I took over a internet company that actually was a search engine back in 2000. Worked with venture capital companies, my first experience with all of that, and went through that whole, you've heard of the dot-com implosion. I was part of that. I took over a company, and then within months, the whole internet was starting to crash. And fortunately, I found a way to have it last for about 3 years, made pitches to Comcast and Verizon, because I was able to buy with that company. And this was one of my first experiences at buying an asset, where we went out to Silicon Valley and bought the assets of a company that was doing multiplayer gaming and had voice and video chat services. This is back in 2000. And it's all in Wikipedia under this company called mplayer.com that we bought the assets from. And so those kind of wheeling and dealing experiences, I started to get through that. Then I, years later, took over a synthetic turf company. But in my head, I was always intrigued with the human mind. And when people say, well, you can't do this or you can't do that, and being able to do it, throughout my lifetime, and then seeing other people who, people counted them out and see them achieve. And of course, as you know, Ken, with sports, I mean, that's one of the best teachers of overcoming adversity and the power of belief and the power of our minds to do things that we may have not thought of that we could do. But it was in about 2007 or so when I was with the turf company that I was invited to a meeting where they were raising money for a company that they called Reflective Learning. And this company had the intellectual property rights to material that came out of the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center, where they had done decades and decades of research on what makes people fall into this state of helplessness where, if they didn't achieve something, or if they had repeated failures of trying and, or they had suffered through a traumatic event, or series of layoffs or whatever, that they can actually fall into this state of helplessness. And we see this, certainly in our community, where there are people that just believe that the deck is stacked against them. And even though there are a lot of things that were put in place to certainly stunt our growth and development, it still is not impossible to overcome those and succeed. So just as there is this thing called learned helplessness, where people can learn after being beat down and having repeated failures, they just give up and fall down. They also found that people can also learn to be optimistic. They can learn to bounce back faster from any adversity. And they identified a series of inner strengths and skills that if people would possess those, then learn them, then it would take them to another level of effectiveness. I became very intrigued with that because of all of those experiences I shared with your viewing audience here through business and sports and just life. This makes sense. And when I read the material, I said, oh my gosh, this is perfect. These are the things that I've done, although I never identified them as emotion regulation or impulse control or self-efficacy, the things that they were called. And I said, man, I would love, in this stage of my life, I would love to run a company that helps people through this evidence-based material. Unfortunately, as they were raising the money, they had already identified a CEO and they had a staff, and they were just trying to raise more money for it. They put together a 6-hour online course and so forth. So I just went about my business, focusing on other things, until one day, fast forward about 4 years later, I bumped into one of the major investors in that company and asked how the company was doing. And he said, well, not too good. They were focusing on, they created a 6-hour online course, and they were focused on companies. They said, look, if your employees, Mr. or Miss HR person, if we can get this into your company and you can pay us for this online course for your employees, they're going to be more resilient. You're going to make more money. Now, I knew, based on my experience, that when people had a better psyche and they were more optimistic and more solutions focused, that they can achieve, far greater results than otherwise. But most folks didn't realize that. I realized it through the experience. So I said, this material can work. But unfortunately, those companies just could not see it. And that company did not make the kind of money that they expected. The investors got tired. And so when I saw this guy, he said, well, we're not doing too well. You want to buy it? I said, yeah, definitely. Man, I was thinking about being a CEO and working for the company. And he's talking about, I could buy it. Oh, no doubt. But the problem was the price point was such that I would have to raise money to do it.
Right.
And I would have to tap into, my savings to do it. But I was determined. I said, I could change the world. This is in the next phase of my life. This is all I want to be able to be doing, because I had envisioned making money only by helping people and helping them, change their mindsets. And so it took about 8 months, but we found a way to make it happen. And I'll tell you the secret of acquiring this company. And it was, and anybody can do this. It was from a tape set that I acquired called the Secrets of Power Negotiating by a guy named Roger Dawson. And Roger Dawson always talked about win-win negotiating. It's not about you just trying to steal something from somebody, because that's kind of hard to do. Once they realize it, they're not going to appreciate you very much.
Right.
But if you're trying to find a way that both sides can win, then you can accomplish something. You have a better chance when they feel good that, hey, well, okay, this is a great deal for me. And you say, well, this is a great deal for me. And there was one thing that he talked about that I would suggest everyone do. When it comes to real estate, I did this with my first property when I was in my, I guess, 20s, mid 20s. And when I bought my first property, it was a 5-bedroom, 2 garage, 2.5 bath house in New Jersey. And I had 3 mortgages on it. I assumed one, I got a second from a bank, and I had the owner take back a third. And we did that because we said, look, I want to get this place, but can we do it my way? Well, we did that with this company. And I said, and the term that's used outside of win-win is, I'll give you your price, because they quoted a price.
Right.
I'll give you your price if you give me my terms.
Okay.
So, whatever it is, I'm not going to try to, negotiate that down and say, well, I don't think it's worth that. It's going to be worth this. Now you're going to make them feel bad. And they're like, you know what? I don't even want to deal with you.
Right.
But I said, look, you want this price? I'll give you the price. But let's talk about how we structure it so that it's a win for me. And that's what we did. And it worked. And I was able to acquire the company. But then the task was, I acquired it, and I created a company, Power Thinking Corp, and we're at powerthinkingcorp.com to acquire this company, Reflective Learning. And so one of the things that people want to do is, when you acquire a company, you don't necessarily have to acquire the whole company, because if a company has some significant debt, you don't want the debt.
No. So they can keep that.
Let them keep the debt. So it was an asset purchase. So I said, I'll buy the assets. I'll buy the domain names, the actual courses, but you can keep all the money you owe.
Right.
figure out how to pay that. So asset purchase, everyone, not whole company. And so we're able to do that. And then the big task was, okay, so they weren't successful with this.
Mm-hmm.
What makes me think I'm going to be successful? How can I make this successful? And I know that this company, brought in investors, and people invested money, and it didn't work out. And so I got nothing. What makes me think I can get investors when the other investors invested in this concept and failed? So I knew I had to bootstrap it, which meant, come on, everybody, what you have to realize. See, don't think, oh man, yeah, that's what I want. I just want to be successful, because it sounds like this guy's successful. I had to make some serious sacrifices. I drove Jaguars for almost 20 years. And then when I crashed it and I got a settlement for it, given what I needed to do to fund this company and make sure it lasts, I have 80% ownership. And I didn't want investors, because I didn't want to happen to me what happened to the other folks. When I bought them out, they had nothing. I wanted to stay in control, so which meant I had to fund it with my own cash. So everything I did was about minimizing expenditures so I can invest it to keep this company going. So when I
Okay.
didn't got the money for the car, I went out and got an older car, a nondescript kind of a car, no elite car where I had to, had debt so everything was about the business. So you may have to change your lifestyle when you want to pursue something that you're passionate about. Many times you can't have it all, at least not at first.
Right.
So you may have to make some sacrifices and do things and that you certainly otherwise may not be comfortable with to follow that big dream that you have. And I was able to do that. And over the past year or 2 years, we found the right business model. It took me to Japan and China, and certainly when my work with Aflac. And I think I have now the business model that's going to work for people and work for me as well.
So, and I got to stop saying so before every question, but so let me ask you. I mean, Stan, you've had a great career. So, your telephone company, cable, startups, internet, some bumps along the road. But at this stage, you got grown children. Why take on such a project like this when you've had a good career? You can pretty much sail off into the sunset.
Well, for me, it wasn't just about me. See, you say I could sail off into the sunset. I could have. I could have not taken certain risks and just been conservative, drive the kind of car I want and, had a big house with the pool, just kind of live it out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you kind of go back to where I was in my 20s when I started that first credit seminar, it was something about me, and I think I got this from my mother because she became, especially when my dad left us with 6 kids and he left, and my mother and 6 kids, and I didn't know this, but our house was going into foreclosure. But she did what we teach in our training. One of the inner strengths that makes people more resilient is actually what people don't see as a strength, but it is a strength, and that's reaching out. And she reached out to get help. She got help from an organization called the Consumer Education and Protective Association. They called it SEPA in Philly. And they were all about helping people, when people were ripped off by companies, like maybe bad furniture or whatever item they would purchase, and the company wouldn't take it back. And they would actually organize pickets around that company if the company said, "Oh, we're not going to give you your money back," or whatever. Well, they helped her out of that whole foreclosure situation. And then she became active in that company to help other people. She became their grievance chairwoman. And so whenever someone had a grievance with a company, they'd come to her and she'd hear it out. She'd go in, talk to the business owner, decision makers. When they said, "I'm sorry, we're not going to do anything," she'd organize pickets. They'd have signs. They'd have pictures in the paper, and before you know it, they said, "Come on in. Can you put the signs down?" And that was just so powerful. So it was during that time in my 20s when I did my financial seminars and advice that I was making a difference. And remember, when I was leaving the company, the telephone company in the first place, I was leaving to take the risk to build that business to help people, particularly in our community.
Right.
When I noticed that needle over that, I guess it was about 25-year period, that I wasn't doing that anymore. I turned the column over to someone else in the radio show. I said, the needle really hasn't moved in terms of progress, especially economically, in the African American community.
Right.
And I don't want to leave here and not be able to do something move the needle, at least in some small way. And so my thinking evolved from just financial information, to present financial information, to it's really here. It's really in our thinking and our beliefs that have to change, because if it changes, then we're going to be more open to financial information, to taking steps and taking action. Knowledge without action is nothing. And so, especially when you're knocked down and been knocked down.
Right.
So my thinking ultimately moved to that we need to change how people perceive themselves and their ability to overcome any adversity. And my thought was, forget about money. Money will come. And I've already experienced the kind of things that money can buy. And for me, that wasn't what life was all about. If I can make a difference in someone else's lives and make money, then that's the perfect combination. And I was determined that's the way I would want to live my life. And that's
so I'm so you probably jumped over, but I'm asking you directly because I ask everybody this on the show, like it's the theme of the show. What is your why? I think you just hit it, but I got to start putting it at the beginning of the show and not the end of the show. But what is your why?
Yeah, it is, Ken, it is. I exist to make other people better. And as I make them better, I'm better. And so if I can help the human race globally, and I'm actually editing material for my partners in China, in Chongqing, and I have a partnership with folks in Japan. I have a new partnership with folks in Australia, a person who's now a new member of Power Thinking, who's married to, he's Caucasian, he's married to one of the indigenous folks, the Aboriginals in Australia, and he wants to see a better life for his kids. So my why is helping people to get the most out of themselves and out of their lives. And so as I'm doing that, I don't think I'm working. People say, when talk about retirement. Retirement is kind of doing what you want to do on your terms. And that's what I'm doing. Every day that I get up, it's not, I spend a lot of time doing what I do, but not a second working, what I consider working. And that is just earning an income, to have things and do things. I'm doing exactly what I was put here to do.
And that's fantastic. And I think everybody should take from that, that you can get to a point to do that. You're here doing what you're here. And I think that's part of what we're talking about when we talk about that voice in the back of your head about get it done. First, we're going to ask you we ask everybody, we're building a book list. Like we want people to be able to go to the Phoenix Rising community and pull down a list of books that they could read to inform, educate, and inspire them. So what would be one book? You only get one book that you recommend to change somebody's life. No pressure.
It goes back to when I kind of got into this whole entrepreneurial thing. And my younger brother, he's 7 years younger, and he was entrepreneurial. I mean, he actually came up, he made records. I mean, he had no experience in the music business, and there were a couple of rap records back in the 80s that he was able to do. There was a big one-hit wonder, one of the top 100 one-hit wonders called Two of Hearts by Stacey Q. With two of hearts, two hearts that beat. He was one of the writers of that song, no experience. And I was a corporate person at Bell Atlantic, and he shared with me this book, and it was called Think and Grow Rich. And I said, Think and Grow Rich? That don't even make any sense, man. I'm a big Mr. Corporate guy. How can you think and grow rich? Just think and you just grow rich. But when you look at what I do today, it goes back to many of the concepts talked about in that book. Because my company is called Power Thinking, and I focus on the negative thoughts that we have to extinguish and put aside. And in the book, there was one quote that I'll never forget, and that is that you are what you think about. You are what you think about. And if we can change our thoughts, then we can change our trajectory. So yes, I would recommend that book by Napoleon Hill.
So Um, Stan, Power Thinking, uh, Phoenix Rising community. I want you to be on this call. Give them all the information they need to get in touch with you.
Sure. I tell you what, I'm going to give you my phone number and my cell number. You can text me your first and last name. I'd love for you to be on these Wednesday calls that we do. They're absolutely no cost. And only 30-minute investment, 7:30 to 8 a.m., 9:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. It is our power thinking, rejuvenating your amazing mind trainings. And if you're on these calls consistently for at least 3 to 4 months, you're going to find a difference in how you respond to even a minute adversity, like an argument with a significant other, to a global pandemic, and to sales, all the things that you may experience and may have experienced setbacks from. So that's Wednesdays, 7:30 to 8 a.m., 9:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. And if you text me your first and last name, I'll make sure that we get you on the text list so that we'll send out a text on Tuesday nights with a short video that we'll discuss on Wednesdays. And you'll always get those reminders on Wednesdays for the morning and for the evenings. That phone number is 215-219-8409. That's 215-219-8409. Or you can go to the website, www.powerthinkingcorp.com. That's powerthinkingcorp.com.
And if y'all are wondering, if you're on those calls, you might get the grand idea to build a Black business class and think that you have the audacity to be able to do it through Phoenix Rising and the programming that we're doing here, building content for Black business owners and folks who want to be in business. So definitely check out the calls, check out Power Thinking. Stan, again, I appreciate your time. One of the last questions I want to get from you or answered from you is what, and you're probably the best guy to answer this question. But if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm, like you said, working somewhere, but I know that I have something more to offer the world, how do I get out? How do I step over the fear? I think we begin to term it here in the Phoenix Rising community. How do I step over that fear and give to the world what I'm supposed to be giving to the world through my business?
Yeah, it's a great point. And by the way, folks can actually go on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn. I'm at Stanley H. Greene, Greene, on LinkedIn. Love to connect and we can have a dialogue. And we can dialogue about what you're just mentioning. I'll never forget hearing this one saying that the best way to overcome fear is to do what you fear most. So when I had a lot of anxiety over starting a seminar, when I really didn't like to speak in public, and I didn't know if I could, do what those people said, all these people are coming to Philly and come in and out of town and do these big seminars in real estate and so forth. You can do that, Stan. And I wasn't sure. And I delayed it until I decided this is what I fear doing. You know what? I'm just going to do it. When I try to get out of speaking engagements, I'll never forget this group of young people, they were early teens and basketball team, and they wanted me to speak at their banquet. It was going to be at a local McDonald's. You just get up and do a talk. I was scared to do that. I mean, I found ways to get out of that, and they kept coming back at me, kept coming. And I said, you know what? I fear this. The best way to overcome that fear is to just do it. And I did it. And after it was over, I said, I'm in one piece. And the kids said they loved it. I was like, hey, that wasn't so bad. So yeah, the best way to overcome that fear is to do it. Every situation that we discussed tonight, I just decided I was going to do it. Whether it was writing that newspaper column, whether it was leaving the company, it was a lot of fear. You just did it. And that's going to lead you to now that you're out there, it's going to lead you to making sure that it's going to be successful. And I'm so happy. And I thank you for for mentioning how, being on those calls, helped you to go out and just do this and not just think about it, but actually make it happen. And now here we are on Phoenix Rising,
Yeah.
the fastest growing and most influential programs in the United States of America.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Stan. And don't forget to hit the share, like, and subscribe button. So again, Stan, thank you. Thanks a lot for stopping by and joining us today. We appreciate it. We're glad to have Power Thinking into the Phoenix Rising community. What's on your whiteboard? If there's somebody out there who can help you move the ball forward, what's on your whiteboard? What's something that you need that maybe somebody out in our community might be able to reach out to you and help you move your ball forward?
Sure. Well, the focus and what I found this year was that I had a person that reached out to me on LinkedIn and said that, hey, I can reach out to 150 of your contacts today, and I have like 24,000 now. 150 of your connections a day for $150 a month. And I said, this is too good to be true, but let me give the guy a try. I'll be out $150 if it don't work. And it worked. And I'm expanding as a result of it. So if there's anyone out there who's really good at social media, particularly Facebook ads, I did it a few years back and was able to really build a list of folks in Africa. But if you are really proficient in Facebook advertising and other social media advertising, then certainly reach out to me, 215-219-8409, or go to the Power Thinking site to the contact form and put your information in. That's the thing that's on the whiteboard. Facebook has over 1 billion people. My daughter is actually, in a senior position there now after leaving Ford. But if you, and in advertising, but if you understand small business, Facebook advertising, and how to drive people to websites, to landing pages, then certainly reach out 215-219-8409 or go to powerthinkingcorp.com. But thanks for asking that, Ken.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Sam. I mean, this is what we're about. We're building a business community, and every business needs vendors. We don't do this thing by ourselves. And so Sam, thanks again. I'll be on the call on Wednesday. So I'll be looking for my Tuesday text. And like I said, on the call, you got people from all over. It's funny when you, and I'll say so, but it's funny when we started this, my friend from Jimmy who's on the calls from Xerox in New York, he was like, hey, tell Stan I said, hey. I told her I was going to interview you. So yeah, I mean, you're definitely doing a great thing. And it's just going to grow. It's fantastic. And like I said, and I'm going to let you, so let me do this real quick. If you're watching on any of the social medias, you know the drill. We need you to engage the video, share, like, if you've been inspired, if you made it this far, there's some inspiration that you've gotten, there's some education that you've gotten, and there's some information. And so all we're asking, the only cost for that is share this video. Share this with a friend, share this with that person that when you heard Stan talking, you like, oh, Eric needs this, or somebody needs this, send it to him. But I'm going to I usually end talking, running my mouth, but I'm going to let Stan end this because I think Stan ends the calls the best way. And because this is definitely something that we believe at Phoenix Rising. And Stan, if you're going to think.
Hey, since we spend most of our time thinking, we must use power thinking. So make it a fantastic day and remainder of 2020, and most people will be listening to this in 2021 and beyond. Whenever you're listening to this, do your best to make it a fantastic day because you have the choice.